Welcome back, dear friends, and thank you for joining me again. Before we get started, take a moment to settle in. Grab your favorite mug of tea, sit out on the porch if the weather is kind, or simply find a quiet chair where you can relax. Today, I want to have the kind of conversation neighbors share over an old wooden fence while admiring the vegetable patches they've spent years caring for. Many of us have followed the exact same gardening routine for decades. Every morning, before breakfast, we pick up the watering can or unwind the hose. We carefully give every flower, every pepper, every cucumber, and every berry bush a quick drink. It feels responsible. It feels like we're taking good care of our gardens. But have you ever noticed something strange? Despite all that effort, the cucumber vines still look tired by afternoon. Your peppers refuse to grow the way they should. The lettuce wilts long before sunset. And somehow the weeds seem healthier than the vegetables you've been pampering. It makes you wonder whether all that hard work is really helping. Here's something many experienced gardeners eventually discover. Sometimes the habits we've trusted for years quietly work against us. Not because we're careless, but because gardening keeps teaching us new lessons no matter how long we've been doing it. Today we're going to explore 15 watering mistakes that many gardeners make without realizing it. These aren't complicated scientific tricks or expensive systems that require fancy equipment. In fact, most of the solutions cost almost nothing. They're simple techniques passed down through generations, supported by modern research, and proven by gardeners who have spent lifetimes growing healthy crops. Whether your backyard is filled with raised beds, neat rows of onions, strawberry patches, fruit trees, or containers lining the patio, these ideas can save you water, reduce your workload, and help your plants become stronger than ever. So, let's begin with the first mistake. Mistake number 1, watering every single day. This is probably the most common habit in home gardens. Imagine stepping outside each morning. You give every bed a quick spray for 2 or 3 minutes, just enough to darken the surface of the soil. It looks moist. Everything appears refreshed, and you feel satisfied knowing you've done your job. The problem is that appearances can be deceiving. Most of that water never reaches the deeper roots. Instead, it wets only the top inch or 2 of soil. Plants naturally send their roots wherever moisture is easiest to find. If water is always sitting near the surface, that's exactly where the roots stay. Unfortunately, shallow roots create weak plants. The first hot summer afternoon arrives. The top layer dries out within hours, and suddenly those plants begin drooping even though they were watered only that morning. Now, picture a different approach. Instead of giving your beans, zucchini, tomatoes, and herbs a tiny drink every day, you water deeply. You allow the moisture to soak 8, 10, or even 12 inches into the ground. Suddenly, the roots have a reason to travel downward. Deep roots unlock hidden moisture, reach valuable nutrients, and protect plants during heat waves. Think of an old apple tree standing through weeks without rain. It survives because its roots have spent years searching deep underground. Your vegetable plants may never grow roots that large, but the same principle still applies. A thorough soaking followed by several days of natural drying encourages stronger growth than dozens of shallow waterings ever could. The easiest way to remember this is simple. Don't give your garden tiny sips all day long. Give it a proper drink, allow the soil to breathe, then water again only after the moisture several inches below the surface has started disappearing. Your plants will actually become less dependent on you, and that's exactly what healthy gardens are supposed to do. Mistake number 2, giving up on dry, water-resistant soil. Sooner or later, almost every gardener runs into this frustrating problem. You carry a watering can over to one of your raised beds after several scorching summer days. You pour water onto the soil, expecting it to soak in immediately. Instead, something surprising happens. The water beads up on the surface like rain falling onto wax. It rushes toward the edges of the bed, spills onto the pathway, and disappears without reaching the roots at all. You check the soil 15 minutes later. The top looks darker, but underneath it's still dry and dusty. This isn't your imagination. When certain soils become extremely dry, especially those containing large amounts of peat, They can actually begin resisting water instead of absorbing it. Gardeners often assume they simply need to water longer, but much of that extra water continues running away instead of sinking where it's needed. Fortunately, there's an incredibly simple solution. Rather than trying to flood the bed all at once, lightly moisten the surface first, then leave it alone. Go harvest a few beans, pull a handful of weeds, sit beneath a shade tree for 10 or 15 minutes. During that short break, the upper layer begins softening. Tiny pores reopen, allowing water to move downward much more naturally. When you return for the second watering, you'll notice a remarkable difference. Instead of flowing across the surface, the moisture slowly penetrates deep into the soil where the roots actually live. Sometimes, gardening rewards patience more than strength. If you're preparing fresh planting beds this season, consider mixing in coconut coir instead of relying entirely on peat-based materials. Coconut coir usually re-wets much more easily after drying out, making future watering far less frustrating. Mistake number 3. Watering the whole plant. Instead of the root zone, many gardeners naturally spray everything from above. The leaves sparkle with water droplets. The stems look freshly washed, and for a few minutes the entire garden seems refreshed. But plants don't drink through their leaves. Their roots do all the work. When water lands on the foliage during a warm day, a large portion simply evaporates before it ever reaches the soil. Even more importantly, overhead watering can create unnecessary problems. Strong streams of water splash tiny bits of soil onto the lower leaves. Those little specks of dirt often carry fungal spores or bacteria, waiting for the right conditions to spread. That's one reason diseases seem to appear almost overnight after repeated overhead watering. A much better approach is directing water exactly where it belongs. Aim the hose near the base of each plant. Use a watering wand if bending over has become uncomfortable. Soaker hoses and drip irrigation systems also work beautifully because they deliver moisture slowly and directly into the soil. Your back stays happier. Your water bill often becomes smaller, and your plants spend less time fighting unnecessary diseases. Now let's be fair. Not every plant suffers from wet leaves. Leafy greens such as kale and spinach and cabbage usually tolerate occasional overhead watering without much trouble, especially when temperatures remain cool. Fruiting plants, however, tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, squash, and eggplants are much more sensitive during the growing season. Whenever possible, water the soil instead of the leaves. It's a small change that can make a surprisingly large difference over the course of an entire summer. Mistake number 4. Ignoring one of gardening's oldest watering methods. Sometimes the smartest ideas aren't new inventions. In fact, some are thousands of years old. Long before electric pumps, timers, plastic tubing, and automatic sprinklers existed, gardeners in dry climates developed an incredibly clever way to water crops. They buried unglazed clay pots beneath the soil. These simple containers slowly released moisture through their porous walls, allowing nearby roots to absorb exactly what they needed. No electricity, no batteries, no complicated setup, only gravity, clay, and patience. Today, many gardeners overlook this method simply because modern advertisements rarely mention it. Yet for backyard vegetable gardens, it remains one of the most efficient watering systems ever created. Here's how it works. Choose a plain, unglazed terracotta pot and seal the drainage hole at the bottom. Bury the pot so that only the neck remains above the surface. Fill it with water and place a lid, flat stone or small saucer, over the opening to keep insects and debris out. Now the interesting part begins. The clay walls slowly allow water to pass through, but only when the surrounding soil becomes dry enough to pull moisture from the pot. As the soil becomes wetter, the flow naturally slows down. In other words, the garden regulates its own watering. The roots take what they need, when they need it, without constant attention from you. This ancient method works especially well around tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, melons, and other vegetables that appreciate consistent moisture. During the hottest weeks of summer, you may only need to refill each pot once or twice a week. It's quiet, it's reliable, And it has helped gardeners grow crops successfully for centuries. One small limitation is worth mentioning. If your garden contains very heavy clay soil, water moves more slowly through the surrounding ground. Mixing compost into the planting area before installing the clay pot usually improves the results considerably. Sometimes the oldest solutions survive because they simply work. Mistake number 5. Believing midday watering burns plant leaves. You've probably heard this warning countless times. Never water your garden in the middle of a sunny day because the water droplets act like tiny magnifying glasses and burn the leaves. It sounds perfectly reasonable. Most people accept it without questioning whether it's actually true. The reality is much less dramatic. For the vast majority of vegetables, herbs, flowers, and fruit plants, water droplets do not become miniature lasers capable of scorching healthy leaves. Researchers have tested this idea under real sunlight and found that ordinary garden plants simply don't experience leaf burns from water droplets sitting on their surfaces. So why do experienced gardeners still recommend avoiding midday watering? The answer has nothing to do with burning leaves. It comes down to efficiency. During the hottest part of the day, temperatures rise, the air becomes drier, and sunlight speeds up evaporation. A significant portion of the water disappears into the atmosphere before the soil has a chance to absorb it. You're essentially paying to water the air. Whenever possible, water early in the morning. The soil is cooler, the wind is usually calmer. Moisture has several hours to move downward before the afternoon heat arrives. That means more water reaches the roots instead of evaporating into the sky. One more thing often confuses gardeners. Large plants like pumpkins, squash, and zucchini sometimes droop dramatically on hot afternoons. Many people immediately reach for the hose. But temporary wilting during intense heat doesn't always mean the soil is dry. Plants sometimes allow their leaves to relax slightly as a natural way of reducing moisture loss. Check them again later in the evening. If they've recovered on their own, they probably never needed extra water in the first place. Mistake number 6. Watering too late at night. If mornings are the best time to water, many people naturally ask another question. Wouldn't nighttime be even better? There's no hot sun, so surely less water evaporates. It seems logical, but watering very late in the evening can quietly create another problem. When leaves remain wet throughout the entire night, they're surrounded by cool temperatures, still air, and high humidity. Those conditions happen to be exactly what many fungal diseases enjoy most. Instead of helping your plants, you're giving unwanted organisms several uninterrupted hours to multiply. If mornings don't fit your schedule, don't worry. Late afternoon is usually an excellent alternative. Just try to keep the water directed toward the soil rather than spraying the leaves. Even better, use drip irrigation or a soaker hose. Since the water stays at ground level, your plants receive everything they need while the foliage remains dry. Mistake number 7. Leaving the soil completely bare. If there's only one lesson you remember from today's discussion, let it be this one. Never leave your garden soil exposed if you can help it. Bare soil loses moisture much faster than most people realize. Under the summer sun, the top layer heats up quickly, dries out within hours, and begins forming a crust. When you see that dry surface, it's tempting to water again, even though the deeper soil may still contain plenty of moisture. Over time, this leads to overwatering. The upper inch keeps drying while the lower layers remain soaked. Plants don't enjoy those constant swings between too wet and too dry. Fortunately, nature provides an easy solution. Cover the soil with a layer of organic mulch. Shredded leaves, clean straw, pine needles, grass clippings that haven't been treated with chemicals, or wood chips all work wonderfully. A layer just 2 to 4 inches thick can dramatically reduce evaporation, keep the soil cooler during hot afternoons, and help maintain much more consistent moisture levels. There's another benefit many people overlook. As the mulch slowly breaks down, earthworms and beneficial soil organisms begin feeding on it. They improve the soil structure naturally, creating tiny air passages that allow roots to breathe while helping rainwater soak in more efficiently. In other words, mulch doesn't simply protect your plants. It improves the entire underground ecosystem. Just remember to leave a small gap around the stems of vegetables and flowers. Piling mulch directly against the stems can trap too much moisture and encourage rot. Mistake number 8. Treating every plant exactly the same. It's easy to assume that every plant in the garden wants identical care. After all, they're all growing outside together. But gardens are more like neighborhoods than factories. Every plant has its own personality. Leafy vegetables like spinach, lettuce, Swiss chard, and bok choy prefer consistently moist soil because their roots stay close to the surface. Allow them to dry out repeatedly and they'll quickly become bitter or bolt before producing a proper harvest. Meanwhile, vegetables such as peppers, tomatoes, and eggplants develop much deeper root systems. They prefer thorough watering, followed by a period of gentle drying. Then there are crops like garlic, onions, rosemary, lavender, and thyme. These plants often dislike constantly wet conditions and may actually suffer if watered as frequently as leafy greens. One of the easiest ways to simplify watering is grouping plants with similar moisture needs together. Keep thirsty vegetables in one section, place drought-tolerant herbs in another. Doing this allows every watering session to benefit the right plants without accidentally soaking those that prefer drier conditions. Your garden becomes easier to manage, healthier overall, and much more forgiving during busy weeks. Mistake number 9. Misunderstanding blossom end rot. Every summer, countless gardeners become discouraged after discovering dark, leathery spots forming on the bottoms of their tomatoes or peppers. Many immediately assume the soil lacks calcium. They begin crushing eggshells, pouring milk around the plants, or buying expensive calcium products from the garden center. Surprisingly, calcium usually isn't the real problem. Most garden soils already contain plenty. The issue is getting that calcium into the developing fruit. Calcium travels through the plant along with water. When watering becomes inconsistent, extremely dry one week and soaking wet the next, that steady flow is interrupted. Young fruits can't receive enough calcium at exactly the moment they need it most. The result appears as blossom end rot. Instead of constantly adding more calcium, focus on maintaining even soil moisture. Water deeply. Use mulch to reduce evaporation. Avoid allowing the soil to swing between extremes. Once the plant receives a consistent supply of water, it becomes much easier for nutrients to move naturally throughout the entire plant. Sometimes solving a garden problem isn't about adding something new. It's simply about creating the right conditions for nature to do what it already knows how to do. Mistake number 10. Disturbing the living soil beneath your feet. Most gardeners spend plenty of time looking at what grows above the ground. Far fewer think about what lives underneath it. Beneath every healthy garden lies an enormous network of microscopic fungi that work alongside plant roots every single day. These beneficial organisms form partnerships with vegetables, flowers, shrubs, and even fruit trees. The relationship is surprisingly simple. Plants produce sugars through sunlight and share some of that energy with the fungi. In return, the fungi spread far beyond the reach of the roots, collecting moisture and nutrients from tiny spaces that roots alone could never reach. Think of them as an underground delivery system. The healthier this hidden network becomes, the easier it is for plants to survive dry weather and absorb important minerals from the soil. Unfortunately, constant digging, deep tilling, and unnecessary soil disturbance can destroy much of this natural system. Every time the soil is aggressively turned over, countless fungal threads are broken apart. That's why many experienced gardeners now disturb their soil as little as possible. Instead of repeatedly digging everything up, they add compost to the surface, cover beds with mulch, and allow worms and microorganisms to slowly improve the soil naturally. Healthy soil doesn't just feed plants. It supports an entire living community that quietly helps your garden every single day. Mistake number 11. Watering according to the calendar. Many gardeners create a schedule every Monday, every Thursday, maybe every other evening after dinner. While routines are helpful in everyday life, Gardens don't always follow calendars. A cool week with cloudy skies may leave the soil moist for days. A hot, windy stretch can dry the exact same bed in less than 24 hours. If you water simply because it's Tuesday, you may accidentally soak already wet soil. If you skip watering because it's not watering day yet, your vegetables could spend hours struggling in dry ground. Fortunately, checking your soil takes only a few seconds. Push 1 or 2 fingers, 2 or 3 inches into the soil near your plants. Don't judge by the surface alone. The top layer dries much faster than the root zone. If the soil below still feels cool and slightly damp, your plants probably have everything they need. If it feels dry, loose, and crumbly, then it's time to water. No expensive moisture meter is required. Your own hand is often the most reliable gardening tool you'll ever own. After practicing this simple habit for a few weeks, you'll begin recognizing exactly what healthy soil feels like. Eventually, your garden starts telling you when it needs water instead of the calendar making that decision for you. Mistake number 12. Growing plants in containers without proper drainage container. Gardening has become more popular than ever. It's comfortable, convenient, and perfect for patios, balconies, and small backyards. But containers have one major weakness. Water has nowhere to go unless the pot allows it to escape. Beautiful, decorative containers without drainage holes may look wonderful, yet they often become traps for plant roots. Excess water collects at the bottom. The roots remain constantly wet. Oxygen disappears from the soil. Before long, the roots begin rotting. Ironically, a plant with damaged roots often starts wilting. Many gardeners mistake that wilt for thirst and add even more water, making the situation much worse. Always choose containers with drainage holes. If you absolutely love a decorative pot, without one, simply place a smaller plastic nursery pot inside it. That way, excess water can drain freely while you still enjoy the appearance of your favorite container. Healthy roots always need 2 things working together: moisture and air. Without both, even the healthiest plant will eventually struggle. Mistake number 13. Filling containers with ordinary garden soil. At first, it seems like a smart way to save money. After all, if your backyard already has good soil, why spend extra on potting mix? Many gardeners shovel ordinary garden soil into containers, expecting it to perform the same way it does in the ground. Unfortunately, containers create a completely different environment. Inside a flower pot, heavy soil quickly becomes compacted. The small air pockets that roots depend on slowly disappear, making it harder for water to drain and for oxygen to reach the root system. After a few waterings, the soil often becomes either rock hard or permanently soggy. Neither condition encourages healthy growth. A quality potting mix is designed specifically for containers. It usually contains compost, coconut coir, perlite, or other lightweight materials that allow roots to breathe while still holding enough moisture between waterings. The difference becomes obvious within just a few weeks. Plants grow faster. Roots spread more easily. Water reaches every part of the container instead of pooling near the bottom. Sometimes spending a little more at the beginning saves a great deal of frustration later. Mistake number 14. Planting small seedlings in oversized pots. We've all done it. You bring home a tiny basil plant, a young tomato seedling, or a small pepper plant. Wanting to avoid repotting later, you place it directly into a very large container. It feels generous. Surely giving the plant more room must help it grow. Oddly enough, the opposite often happens. A tiny root system simply can't absorb all the water held inside a large volume of soil. The extra soil stays wet for far too long. Cool, damp conditions surround those young roots day after day. Instead of encouraging growth, they create the perfect environment for root diseases and fungal problems. Think of it like buying shoes for a growing child. You wouldn't purchase boots 6 sizes too large expecting them to grow into them overnight. Plants work much the same way. Move them into slightly larger containers as they grow. Increasing the pot size by only an inch or 2 each time keeps the balance between roots, soil, air, and water exactly where it should be. The plant establishes itself more quickly and continues growing without unnecessary stress. Mistake number 15. Using extremely cold water on sensitive plants. This final mistake is surprisingly easy to overlook. On a hot afternoon, it's tempting to turn on the hose and immediately soak everything with cold water straight from underground pipes. For mature vegetables growing in the garden, this usually isn't a serious problem. Established tomatoes, beans, corn, and pumpkins can generally handle cool water without much trouble. Young seedlings and more delicate plants, however, are another story. Very cold water can temporarily shock tender roots, slowing their ability to absorb moisture until temperatures become more balanced again. You don't need complicated equipment to avoid this. Simply fill a watering can or bucket ahead of time and allow the water to sit outside for a while. As it gradually reaches the surrounding air temperature, it becomes much gentler on newly planted vegetables, herbs, flowers, and container plants. One final note. Many gardeners believe letting water sit overnight removes every chemical added by city water systems. While this may reduce chlorine in some places, many municipalities now use chloramine instead, which doesn't simply disappear after standing for a few hours. So the main advantage of allowing water to rest isn't purification. It's giving the water time to warm naturally before reaching your plants. Sometimes the smallest adjustments make the biggest difference over an entire growing season.